Hey, how are you doing? My name is Darrick Reid, and I am a chemist. I've been a chemist for about 20 years. I graduated in 1996 from Marlboro County High School in Bennettsville, South Carolina, a small town about 55 miles west as the crow flies from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. For me, high school, I was a decent student in maybe my freshman year, my sophomore year. I really didn't get my act together until I was in my junior and senior year. Um, and I started focusing more then on future, getting a career, and pretty much being able to be successful and make something out of my life. So I'm not one of those people who was a straight A student all through high school. I did some sports, not a lot. I was in the band, was in like the beta club, and so I did a lot of scientific clubs. Science always interested me. So I tended to do better in those classes, and I tended to gravitate towards those types of clubs. Outside of high school, I did a lot of public speaking and debating. That's something else that I really like is um, talking in front of people, giving speeches and debating, that type of thing. Growing up in Bennettsville was kind of a challenge. It is a small town with about 10,000 people. It's about 68% African American, about 30% Caucasian. About 30% of the population is below the poverty level. Unemployment rate is critically high, maybe 20%, much higher than the rest of the state. There's not a lot of jobs there, not a lot of industry. Just as an example, they just got their first Walmart about 5 years ago. So it's a very small area with not a lot to do. There's no rollerblading, no roller skate places. There's no clubs. There's no bowling alley. There's no movie theater. There's none of those things. So typically the end thing to do on Friday nights after the football game was for everyone to go to McDonald's or Hardee's and park outside. That's what people did. Um, we had 5 cities in that county. Each city has its own primary, elementary, middle school. For high school, everyone in the county goes to the same high school. So the high school tends to have better resources because you have that pool of all the students going there. Um, I changed my mind only a couple of times when it came to deciding what I wanted to be when I grew up. I remember being very young and stealing some chemicals from my grandmother's cabinet and taking them out into the woods and mixing them up to see what would happen. So I always kind of had that interest. It was there at an early age. And like I said earlier, I kind of gravitated towards anything scientific. I had a lot of questions. I did a lot of reading about stuff like that. And looking back on it now, even though to my young mind at that point it wasn't defined, I did a lot of experimentation. I did a lot of tinkering with things and messing with things to see how they worked and how they'd work together. So I always kind of had that inquisitive mindset, and was always kind of gifted in math and science. So I did pretty well in those. And it was probably high school when I realized that I wanted to be a chemist. I took physical sciences in freshman year and did okay in the class, but it never really clicked. It wasn't until I took AP chemistry in my senior year that everything really kind of came together. I started paying more attention to chemicals that were in things around the house and even in the grocery store, and became fascinated by them. And it just kind of grew into me wanting to, study that in a more formal basis. In order for me to become a chemist, I did my undergraduate studies at South Carolina State University, which is a small HBCU in South Carolina. And I can say that my experience there was excellent. Um, I learned a tremendous amount of things there. I was exposed to a lot of things there. I had professors who really were dedicated to teaching us how to be chemists and compete in that field. There were not a lot of chemistry majors at my school. Not a lot of people, especially black people or African American people, major in chemistry. There were actually 3 of us in my class. So very small classes when it came to learning, but that was to our benefit because there was only three of us. We had an extreme amount of dedication from our professors. And after I completed undergrad, I went to graduate school at Clemson and majored in environmental engineering. And I can say that by contrast, they were totally different experiences. I took the education away from Clemson, but I didn't really build those bonds that I built when I was at SC State. You know, friendships and professional and personal friendships that I have to this day. That's a very, very important uh, concept that we sometimes miss out on. Networking can be everything. You are constantly meeting new people who have different aspects and different perspectives, and those people you should really hang on to. It used to be that people used to have a Rolodex on their desk. If you don't know what that is, Google it. Where they kept all these contacts. You know, we have it in our phones now, but we really, one of the most important things that I've done is making connections. Several of the better jobs that I have had since I've been in my profession have been by referral from people who knew me, knew my work ethic, knew what I brought to the table, knew my skill set and my talent, and referred me to a position and, you know, gave me a good recommendation, and keeping in touch with those people. And likewise, I've done the same for colleagues. For me, the difficult part to my career path was kind of just getting started. That first job is always the more difficult. I think what helped me a lot was that it was a requirement in my program that you do internships every summer. Once you left home to go to that freshman year, there was no more spending the summer hanging out with your friends. You know, every summer you were required to do an internship, and by me doing those internships and me working in an actual lab, seeing how actual lab work was done, how proper write-ups took place, how proper experiment took place, and building those connections and networking with different professors, different other students. When I did graduate from undergrad, I would say I was one of the fortunate ones that I graduated without having a job, but within a month of graduating, I had been offered a position which I took. So in the easier part of my path for my career was probably gaining contacts. I've always been very, very comfortable with meeting new people and interacting with new people. And I think I picked that up from public speaking. Being in that arena, you kind of learn to control, even when you were nervous, you learn how to keep that at bay and do what you had to do. So by being in those types of avenues, I got very comfortable with myself and comfortable talking to other people, something that I didn't have growing up. And so I'm very grateful to the people who got me involved in that and supported me in that, because it helped a lot in career. One very important thing for me to remember in my career, and this was something that I took away from a speech that I heard years ago when I was probably in my freshman or sophomore year of college, was that you're standing on the shoulders of a lot of people. There are a lot of people who made sacrifices that you don't even know about in order for you to get here. And so you kind of start college with a debt, not a financial debt, but you start off with a debt to the people who gave to you when you couldn't give to yourself, or the people who broke through a barrier that you couldn't break through, or the people who supported you, you know, even when you may not have believed in yourself. So I always felt that, you know, I was standing on someone's shoulders, and so I owed it to them and I owed it to myself to give everything that I had to give. The advice that I'd give for middle school students who think they want to become a chemist is pretty much the same advice I'd give to a high school student. And it is to be sure to not just learn what's in your text for your science classes, for your chemistry classes, for your math classes, but to go above and beyond that, to expand on those concepts, to use your free time to grow your knowledge in those fields, and to revisit everything that you learn as you go out for the summer or out for a break. pull out your notes and look over them. Just, 30, 45 minutes a day, a small investment, so that you retain that information. Because once you get into your career, and this probably can span many careers, but once you get into your career, your knowledge base is very important, knowing how to process that knowledge and how to apply it to different concepts. Also, I would say if that's a career that you want to go into, don't be afraid to take the more difficult classes. Don't be afraid to take that teacher that everyone else doesn't want to take because her tests are too hard, or his assignments are too long or too involved. Because those are the types of teachers that are actually getting you ready for college. The types of teachers who are giving you lightweight work or bird work, those teachers aren't really preparing you for the college experience, because it's a total different atmosphere. So I would say venture to take the road less traveled would be what I'd say. I chose chemistry because A, I love chemistry, and B, I did my research. I spoke to some people, and I knew that chemistry would be a well-funded program for me. There were scholarships for minorities who wanted to major in chemistry. So I followed that, and I liked it anyway, so I figured may as well. So when I left undergrad, I didn't have any student loan debts, and I was very gracious for that. But also, like I said, I've always loved chemicals. Always loved chemistry. I've always loved science and the knowledge that abounded from it. Um, there were some times when things didn't exactly work out my way for my career application. There were some jobs that I really wanted, some fields that I really wanted to get into, and did not have the opportunity to get into them. So what I've learned, and I'm still learning this now, or still applying this now, what I've learned is that sometimes a job is a job. Sometimes a job is not going to grow you or develop you. And at that point, you have to grow and develop yourself. That's when you take your off time and you say, okay, I've been wanting to learn this new concept at my job, but it has not happened. So therefore, I'm going to take the time and learn it on my own. And taking that initiative is about you, is for you to grow your career so that you can be as competitive in the market as possible. I didn't really have a plan B. I was either going to go into science or I was going to teach science. So I guess teaching science could be considered what my plan B was. But I never had to dive into that yet. Life is uncertain, so that could happen, but I don't know. The major obstacles that I had to overcome to get into my career were pretty much myself. Um, I'm fortunate to be I'm fortunate to be responsible enough to take responsibility for my errors. And sometimes I've made bad choices career wise and have had to regain my footing from those. So I would say that I've been my greatest obstacle, but I've also been my greatest cheerleader. And with that in mind, I look back over my career and I'm extremely thankful and extremely proud of what I've been able to do. And I'm kind of anxious and excited about what I'm going to be able to do for the next 20 years. I'm going to attach my email address to this. So if anyone wants to contact me with any other questions regarding choosing a career in science, then feel free to do so. And thank you.